Ooh, yeah. The Sonic Truth Dynasty Fantasy Focus Podcast. I'm Alan Seslowsky of RotoWire.com with the OG Theo Gremminger, Podfather, taking a well-earned vacation today. So, Theo, we're holding it down. And today, I want to talk about some of the worst dynasty trades that have happened in your league, that have happened in my league, some dynasty trading practices. I think it's dynasty trading season time. So I think that there's some do's and don'ts that maybe you know already, Theo, maybe most of your leagues knows, but it's a good time to review those if you want to get deals done.
Yeah, you see some rough ones, especially during rookie draft season. It's like the power of the rookie draft makes people do crazy things. You also see people do really crazy things in dynasty startups. I've seen like a obscene stars and scrubs, dynasty startup strategy lately, and it's really weird.
Well, that's usually an auction strategy, stars and scrubs. What do you mean in a snake format?
So what I've seen a few of these managers do is they'll kind of sell out to front load, whether it's Superflex, whether it's single QB, front load, go and get two like mega stars and then two near stars. And then they're mortgaging usually next year's first, and then those sweet spot draft picks, maybe the 5th, 6th, 7th round, 8th round pick. And then all of a sudden they have 4 players, through round 3, and then they're stuck waiting. And then they have to backload their roster. It's a complete imbalance. I mean, if you thread the needle, it can work out. But it's a very, very, very tough way to play Dynasty.
Yeah, a few years ago, that was a certainly a popular strategy, meaning you get 2 stars, like you said, and then when the tier goes flat from like round 4 to like 8, where you're taking a player in round 4, you're like, man, this feels early to take this guy. And then in round 8, you're like, oh, I'm so happy to have this guy. So yeah, that's a shrewd fantasy strategy. The only way that I think that could work is if you are trading up for the 2 elite QBs. So if you have the 101, you're taking Josh Allen, you get back into the top 5 and take your QB2, whether it's, Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts. So it could work then. But yeah, no, your point. And then you're forced into all these horrible trades. And so before we get into those horrible trades, I just want to get into some trading techniques and some do's and some don'ts. Lately, I thought we've settled this. I thought we've already told people that in order to get trades done in your league, one of the don'ts, Theo Gremminger, is not to go, hey, what do you want for player X, right? I'm starting to see that again from some players like, hey, what do you want for Sam Laporta, right? You going to make me do the homework? So, I mean, do you still get that in some of your leagues? The, hey, what do you want for this guy? And expecting you to do all the work?
Yeah, I get the, hey, would this player be available? And I usually just hit reject. I don't even reply. I'm not going to give them any information. If they want the player, they can come at me with an offer. The other thing,
what do you mean you hit reject then? How do you hit reject when they say, hey,
it's the whole, a lot of times like in FFPC, people will, if they're fishing for information, they'll offer like a swap of next year's 7ths with like a note. Right. So it's like a fake trade. Instead of emailing somebody or contacting them with a direct chat, it would be, like kind of a backhanded way of trying to find out information. The other thing they'll do sometimes is they'll send like a click on Sam Laporta on my team, and then on their team, it would be like a 7th rounder, be like, what would you need to get this done? It's like the whole phishing, the whole concept of giving out information is ridiculous. The other one that's a real pet peeve of mine, which is very similar to what you're talking about, is maybe you have 2 quarterbacks that are good. Maybe you have 2 tight ends, or sometimes in tight end premium leagues, you might have I might have a Kincaid Laporta team. And then this year I took, Ben Sinnott because I took him everywhere. And somebody will be like, hey, looks like you have a lot of tight ends. Which one do you value more, so I can send you an offer? And it's like, then I'm going to reveal. It's another like phishing technique. It's like, no, I'm not going to reveal that to you. If you value these guys, come and trade for me. I think there's one thing that like Scott Connor, who we both podcasted with a lot from Dynasty Trades in 5, one thing that he would always talk about is I'm not going to give any information. And I think that's the appropriate way to play Dynasty. I think that if it's your friend in a league, maybe you have a little side chat, but at the end of the day, it's like business. Like, you want somebody to make you an offer. Either that offer gets accepted, rejected, or countered if it's close enough.
Yeah, when Scott talks about not giving any information, like and rightfully so, is being like strategic. Oh, information, it's a business deal. To me, I just don't want to do. I'm too lazy. I don't want to do the work. Like if you want to make me an offer, like when someone says to me, "Hey, what do you want for Dalton Kincaid?" That's a popular one, right? On the teams where you have Kincaid, I always answer an offer, and they say, "Well, what kind of an offer?" I said, an offer I can't refuse, an offer that makes my team better." That's what I always say.
I think sometimes the one time I'll give a little information is I'll say probably more than you're willing to spend.
No, okay, all right. So you're saying overpay, right? Like an overpay.
That's it.
Yeah,
It's
I just said
probably more than you
okay.
want.
That's a good one. That's basically an FU. The one because I'm always scared that I have to do. I forget who it was that said it was some philosopher that said, "Be careful of how you." Oh, you know what? It was this thing in the FBI or the CIA where they used to say, "Be careful how you treat your subordinates because those guys could be, your boss the next." Next year. So I just want to be careful who I'm crapping on for these trades, Theo, because they could be in a position where I'm trying to get a win now piece. So I'm always, just very, very careful to crap on these people. And again, even when I used to get pissed. Did you get pissed when they would send you like, hey, give me Christian McCaffrey and here's a 26 first, right? Like, it ain't getting done for that. And I used to get mad and shout back, but now I just hit decline with no explanation.
Yeah, I mean, I get tilted. Sometimes either if somebody sends you an extremely insulting offer in fantasy, it means either two things. Either they're just have no idea what they're doing, or they think you have no idea what you're doing. Once in a while, in like a startup, when people don't know who people are, they might like fish a little bit. You see this a lot in Dynasty startups where people don't quite understand the value of each pick, and they'll make some little weird offer like I'll trade you my third and my fourth for your like first and whatever. Yeah. And little things like that. But yeah, I think generally having like respect for your league mates, it sounds kind of hokey. It sounds kind of dated, but you're going to get a lot more deals done. People are going to look at you as a fair trader. People are going to look at you as somebody who's willing to listen to offers and willing to counter. So if you start out in sort of bad faith, just like anything, you're not going to want to deal with that person at all. There's people where every single person who plays Dynasty has had a league mate where they send too many trade offers and you don't like getting trade offers from this person. You'll see it in your inbox and you already know it's going to be rejection. You already know they're wasting your time. Every single person has a story like that in Dynasty, Alan. I know you do.
The carpet bomber trader, right? Like you remember the word carpet bombing came from the Vietnam era when the United States was basically flooding the jungles with bombs. You can Google carpet bomb, and the carpet bombing trader. It's annoying to us, but every once in a while you see the carpet bomber trader get one over on a weaker league mate. You're like, oh my God, how did he just get Amon-Ra St. Brown for for a 25 first and some scrubby player? Like the carpet bomber trader, I don't have the morals to be that guy, but he does get them through, Theo.
The carpet bomber trader, I do think that there's something to be said for the person who has the due diligence, where if I'm trying to get rid of a guy for a second, I will send 11 offers, and I'll have 11 offers out there where I'm trying to get people a future second for a guy. And that's just like kind of grinding. It's carpet bombing, but it's also like to serve a purpose. I think like somebody who just sits there and you also have these weirdos who, like in your league, everybody's has a weirdo where you'll look and you'll see you get a trade offer and it's like 4 a.m. that they send it, 3 a.m, 2:30 a.m. Like these people stay up all night long just sending offers. That's another one.
I've actually done that. Well, you know what it is? It's waking up. It's either you're coming home plaster drunk from the strip club, right? I mean, that's scenario one. Or scenario two, more likely, is you get up to take a pee in the middle of the night. You lay down. You're a little restless. You open your phone. You're like, hey, let me throw out a couple trades. I do think that is, but you're right though. I mean, there are definitely what is it called? Friday night, Saturday night, any drinking night is always a good night to accept trades, right? Like people, because I've done it myself in my early Dynasty years. I've sent out some trades. I was like, ooh, next day, why'd I do that?
I will say this: drinking, and I think I had this on the game plan. Shout out to Matty Kiwoom. But we talked about Dynasty trade strategy there. Game Plan's on every Saturday here on Player Profiler YouTube, and a really good, really solid podcast. Maddie's crushing it with Alan's been on there. I've been on there. But we had this discussion last summer. Maddie would talk about how he would actually like go to like a barbecue or something, have a good time, and start sending out Dynasty trade offers. It's like friends don't let friends send out Dynasty trade offers when they're having a good time. I think you gotta take that down a notch. And Alan, also, like, you know, waking up in the middle of the night and then putting the iPhone near your eyes, really, that's like the opposite of like a life hack. That's like, it's not good. Not good.
It's a known bad thing. Wearing the blue blocker glasses is what you're supposed to do. We've gotten a pair of those. My wife wears them every night. Really keeps that blue light out of your eyes. I think that's the next iteration of technology, is the blue block. Well, maybe they want to keep you up and on there, so that's not going to happen. Theo, let's take a quick break right now with a message from FFPC. And when we come back, we're going to show you our first horrible trade. This is an all-timer in my league where Patrick Mahomes was traded for pennies on the dollar. We'll be right back after this.
Hey, why do we partner with the FFPC? Because they have the widest variety of fantasy football formats, and it's the easiest place to find all types of fantasy football contests in the world. What if you want to play for high stakes? Well, they have a $6 million prize pool with their Fantasy Players Championship. They also have way too early best ball leagues that start in February, and Dynasty leagues. They have the closest thing to a liquid market for orphans that there is in all of Dynasty. And the FFPC has sponsored us for half a decade because we are actually delivering information that can help fantasy gamers, and they're generating so much interest and bringing in so many new users, casual users even. The FFPC creates a unique experience where you can both compete against the best and make money. Use promo code UNDERWORLD to get $25 off your first team. $25 off your first team at the FFPC with promo code UNDERWORLD. Go get it!
I like the draft your ass off stuff way better than go get it. Did they talk to Matt about that, or
No, not at all. I think we might have we have multiple underdog ads, so there might have been or we run different ads. So the underdog one is draft your ass off. FFPC is go get it.
Yeah. Okay.
So, it mixing it up. And I have a big FFPC redraft draft tomorrow night, Alan. Thursday night is the start of the summer. That's the Hardway League, which I've shipped it 2 out of 3 years now. So a lot of fear with my league mates in that one. That's a 350, but that's a really good one. That's Dan Williamson is in that from right here, Player Profiler. Austin Martin, who's really, really good. Then some industry people. John Daigle's in it. Davis Maddox in it. Noah Riddell's in it. Dave Hubbard. Tons of really, really sharp FFPC drafters. So, this is I'm going for 3 out of 4, Alan. So shout out to the people listening to this one. Bring your A game tomorrow night. I'm in the 3 spot. Love that spot this year.
Yeah, that's when you win a league like that, it pays for a lot of other mistakes. Theo, I thought you would have our first trade up on the board already because we are talking about terrible Dynasty trades. This one went down while you were prepping it. This one went down in a Dynasty startup league that we did in 2020. And so you got to put your head in that mind. You got to take off the overlay here, Theo.
Oh, you got it. This is
I would think if I just put this up on the board, people would not believe it. And let me explain this one. This is a super flex league where Patrick Mahomes and a 4th-round pick was traded. Now, get into your mindset. Teddy Bridgewater was still a starter at the time. For Daniel Jones, Teddy Bridgewater, and 2 first-round picks. Okay? I mean, this set our league on... You got to take that, Tyler's...
I wanted to share it. It was a great comment. We'll take it off.
Yes. There you go. Yeah, this trade sent my league in complete tilt. Now, let me tell you, this is a league where we have that trade match rule. I've talked about it on this podcast before, Theo, where everyone has a full day to match this trade. It was not matched. And by the way, these 2 picks turned into Christian Watson, and I think the other one was somehow traded for Deshaun Watson. So Patrick Mahomes in a 4th. This is a 2020 trade. This was one of the worst trades I've ever seen in a Dynasty league.
Well, I think the person who traded away Mahomes for Daniel Jones, Teddy Bridgewater, and 2 firsts should not be in your league, Alan. I think that person should be kicked out of the league.
It's my friend Kevin. Well, you want to kick him out of the league?
Yes, I want to kick your friend Kevin out of the league, and I question whether you should be friends with this person
Yeah.
because their judgment here is really really bad, and also this is like a trading 101. It's
Mm.
very difficult to find the elite quarterback in Superflex,
Mhm.
and simply trying to do it with volume of first round picks. It can be done, but the only way you get out of a Mahomes or another elite quarterback is you get a near elite quarterback and another elite asset back. It's
So
like the
so that's
the
the point.
tiering.
Yeah, that's the point of this conversation. Okay, so let's go back in time and we have a trade like this. You want to get rid of Patrick Mahomes. We love the 2 first. That's fine. Teddy Bridgewater at the time was kind of like a Baker Mayfield, a Sam Darnold type, right? Fine, that's a throw in. So if it's not Daniel Jones, who's the piece that should be coming back if you are going to make a trade like this?
One trade that I spoke to one FFPC manager that I know is contemplating. There's a trade that might go down. It would be Kyler Murray and Puka Nacua
There he
for
is.
Patrick Mahomes. That's the kind of trade if you're trying to tier up. You want to get and essentially when you just do the math, Murray and Nacua together probably gets you 4 first round picks, Alan, in Superflex.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like just sheer volume, Mahomes is worth 4 first rounders because at the end of the day, you're talking about in Superflex a top 3 pick in startups. Like if you just start doing the startup pick value and it's the 101, 102, 103 in a Superflex Dynasty startup, how many firsts it would take to get that without that other startup pick back. Like there's really no way to kind of quantify these guys. Like the Josh Allens, the Patrick Mahomes, they're in such a elite tier that it's very difficult to like do the math on what they should bring in a trade. So it better be essentially 4 first round picks.
Yeah,
the equivalent of
I've been offered 4 first round picks over the years for Josh Allen or 3 firsts and like a receiver. I've said no. There's no amount of because what if those picks when you give someone Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes in a normal year, they're going to be a playoff team and probably a Final Four team. So it's pick like think about it this year. It's like Xavier Worthy. I mean, yes, you can get Justin Herbert at 109 in certain years. That does happen. Kenny Pickett would be the opposite of that, where you land a quarterback that you get at 109. So I just think you have to be careful with like pick value. And I think that the takeaway from this, and again, I'm busting on my friend Kevin. He did make this trade. Brandon Adam, who's in the chat here, he was the recipient of this. So I see in here, it's look at us. Oh, that's funny. But I think the key here is what you said. If you're gonna try to get up to quarterback, if you're gonna sell quarterback 1, 2, or 3, you want to get back quarterback 8 through 11. And then something else on top of that. Would you do a trade like this, Patrick Mahomes, if it was Caleb Williams, Jared Goff, and 2 firsts?
Yes, I think now you're talking. Okay. Now you're talking into like a real pivot where actually I might prefer the Caleb Williams, Jared Goff, and 2 firsts.
That's
because
what I'm saying.
In Superflex it gives me the volume of having 2 starters that I view as top 15 guys. Caleb Williams is already going inside of that like top 8 in startups, maybe top 9 in certain leagues. Some leagues as high as like the 105 among quarterbacks. So he's already steamed up into QB1 land. And Jared Goff is always the correct answer for the best value in dynasty startups at the quarterback spot. So
all right,
yeah, I made one trade, Alan, that was sort of in this style of trading away an elite player. It was a FFPC Superflex league. Very difficult one, pretty high stakes one. Team needed an injection of youth and talent, and I pivoted off of Jalen Hurts, and I got back Kyler Murray in the 107, and I already had the 108, so I was able to turn that into Kyler Murray and like Rome Odunze, and then I took Brock Bowers at the 108. So now the team I think has a little bit more juice, and that's the kind of trade, like you said, you pivot down, but you also get a big piece on top, like an Odunze, Bowers level player.
We'll move on to the next trade, but the last thing I'll say about this is if you're trying to get off like Josh Allen, one of the pivot pieces could be Anthony Richardson. So if you have Anthony Richardson, want to get up to Josh Allen, I think that it's a good. Those are conversation starters. There's a lot of optimism on Anthony Richardson because if Anthony Richardson gets a month long or God forbid a season longer again, he's basically the value is tanked, right? I mean, not forever. It's in a bad spot. All right. This next trade, Theo, this is from this year. This happened in one of my leagues. Now, I know there's a lot of anti-running back sentiment, but if you need to get running backs, right? I mean, this one guy gets Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor, right? And the context of this is it's usually like, 2 or 3 flexes, like start 10 or 11. It's super flex. It's slight tight end premium. Obviously a 12-team PPR league. For the 104 and the 311. Let's put the 311 aside for a minute, right? I mean, it matters, but it doesn't matter. The 104 for the 2 running backs. Now, I want you to talk about this first, that if you're a team you have all your pieces in place, you have your receivers, you have your quarter, you just need running backs. 104 is a nice piece. That's going to be Malik Neighbors. It's going to be Jaden Daniels. Is this the correct way to get running back production now? And is for a 104 in Superflex?
I would want more than this for the 104 in Superflex, to be honest with you.
Like what?
I think it's like I would say that I would want
I mean, this
another piece. I know you say it's as good as it gets, but it's like the window for Derrick Henry could be this year only.
Fine.
Just sort of the way that's structured. And then Jonathan Taylor, I know he has the contract insulation, but you just named 2 players going ahead of him in startups in Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors. And I would argue both of them head-to-head are worth more than Jonathan Taylor right now in any Superflex league. And the way it goes with running backs is Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors could gain value this year, whereas Jonathan Taylor, he could keep his current value, but we're talking about him going like, Alan, we're in that Draft Sharks mock startup right now that we're in together. And I took Jonathan Taylor like very end of the second round in a single QB format, and I didn't feel great about it. He just was the best value there. So again, I think I don't think this is like a bad trade. I think that I can see it for both teams' side. But again, I would want one more little small piece, a Christian Kirk level piece on top of Henry and Taylor when we're talking about that truly elite player, especially if it's Jaden Daniels, because the chance that Jaden Daniels, like if we're talking about 3 months from now, we're talking about 6 months from now, Jaden Daniels is the kind of guy where we might say this guy should be treated like Anthony Richardson is right now, like CJ Stroud is right now. And good luck making that trade where you get Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry for CJ Stroud. That's not happening in any Superflex league. Even if you need running backs, you're still not making that trade.
And I agree with you there. The quarterbacks, it's just a whole different world of value.
If it's neighbors,
that's what I was going to say to you. Let's just pretend it's neighbors right now. Like the top 3 are off the board. The 2 quarterbacks and Marv are off the board. The 104 is traded at this point.
I still think I'm leaning towards the Malik Neighbors side. The chat might not like that one. I think people get, I have bags of Jonathan Taylor, but I would happily pivot a number of those to get Malik Neighbors. I just think he's fantastic talent. And we're talking about a 20-year-old wide receiver versus a running back with a little bit of tread on the tires. Now, certainly rejuvenated. Jonathan Taylor is definitely rejuvenated with that contract. The fact that he missed half the year last year, I think, is not necessarily a bad thing for him long-term. But what's his shelf life, the way he plays, Alan, that he keeps returning value? Does he turn into Derrick Henry where he's just forever a beast? Like that doesn't happen too often.
Yeah. But so if you need running backs, right, you set up your team in a great way where you have your tight end, you have your Evan Ingram type, you have just like AJ Brown, Chris Olave, Justin Jefferson, right? You have those guys locked into your lineup. You have Jared Goff and Jalen Hurts as your quarterback. Like it's time. Your running back room is like Gus Edwards and guys that you've just been plugging in. It's time to make a move at this point. At some point, you got to win the league, and you're not going to get a deal on running backs, especially one on Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry, who's a clear win now piece. He doesn't get traded for pennies on the dollars. Derrick Henry is going to be traded for full freight, especially if I'm looking at you, Theo, and you're sitting here and you're ready to win the league. And I can easily tell you, and this is one of those trading techniques that we've talked about. Hey, Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor are what you need to be a serious favorite to win this league. I'm getting the better deal. Of course, you're going to want Malik Neighbors, right? But if you're a buyer of running backs, if you need guys, I mean, Taylor and Henry are, if I told you at least one of these guys, what are the odds that at least one of these guys finish in the top 5 and that both of them finish in the top 10? Probably pretty good as long as there's no injury.
It's a fair point. I will say that the timing of taking on a running back trade like this trade will be available to me in August, September. I can get to right before the season and probably still get this deal done, Alan. What is going to happen between now and the end of August? The only thing that could hurt me is if the 104, if Neighbors or Daniels gets hurt in the preseason. But the only thing that those guys can do is gain, because they're set in terms of value, and all it takes is a little bit of hype in the preseason. Like Daniels is already going off the board as quarterback 13 on Underdog, and Malik Neighbors is a 3rd round pick. So you're talking about a round difference between him and Taylor in redraft and best ball.
Right.
I don't know, Alan. I think that like with the running backs, the timing of it, the fact that things can go wrong with running backs, and they do go wrong with running backs every year in the preseason. This is something where I would want to wait till the last possible minute and try to squeeze out a little bit more and do it right away. And I'll say this, like I still don't think I would do it. And I think like I would take the chance, and I'd say this is, if your price is you're going to need to get Neighbors or Daniels off me to get these 2 running backs, forget it. And I'm going to get into September, October, and then I'm going to go look to try to make some trades. You're going to have at least a third of your league after about 6 weeks is going to say, maybe I should start considering moving older running backs. And I'll take my chances of getting through it with one of these mercenary type guys, whether it's a short-term James Conner, Raheem Mostert type. David Montgomery last year would have been a nice example where I can get through it. I don't know. It's just trading at a truly elite piece to get one semi-long-term piece and then one definitely short-term piece. The one thing with Derrick Henry that scares me a little bit is, like, I agree with you. Like, he's been fantastic. He's led the league in carries for years.
And by the way, he's in a fantastic situation right now in Baltimore too.
One of the best, it's probably the best offense he's ever played in. But a couple of scenarios here, it's him on a new team. New team doesn't always work out for running backs. It's just time and time again. He's different. Now, I think him and Saquon should be exceptions to the rule.
One second, Theo, there's a better chance that Derrick Henry works out than there is Saquon works out. I mean, it's just that there's nobody behind Derrick Henry. There's no other players there other than Mark Andrews that are, and that's a tight end that are considered like, on the Eagles, AJ Brown must get the ball. Devontae Smith will get the ball there, and then you have Saquon, you have Jalen Hurts, who's, a touchdown vulture. I mean, Lamar Jackson runs too. He put on a little weight. We heard that thing, but here's where I'm going to push back on the timing. And by the way, you were right. If you could buy running backs when the risk is squeezed out a little bit, sure. Handshake, that's the right call. But I've been in leagues, and this one specifically, where there was 2 bidders. And if you wait, your opponent who's trying to do a deal gets Derrick Henry. Now, it may not be the same deal, but sometimes when there's 2 buyers, you might think that there's less demand. Sometimes there's more demand when 2 guys are going after it, right? So I agree with you in ideally you wait until there's no risk and the season starts, but sometimes you can't afford. You have to buy before your competition does.
I guess it's a fair point. I just think that it's I guess it's a philosophical way of playing Dynasty. The whole idea of trading away one of these truly elite young guys, I feel like it could burn me more so than, and also like Alan, like I make this trade, I better win the league this year. I better win it this year. That's, I mean, I have to thread the needle. And with Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, if I can manufacture the running back position, that team might be red hot when we get to the fantasy playoffs, and those guys might just go absolutely nuts. So a lot of times we see these younger players make these massive impacts toward the end of the season, whereas some of these running backs sort of break down as the season moves along. So I don't know. It's a philosophical difference, Alan.
No, I understand. Yeah, if I can get Zach Moss or Chase Brown for a late second and fill in the gap with a Ramondre Stevenson, sure, those are great. But sometimes those trades just aren't available to you. And the obvious low-hanging fruit, corporate jargon right there, is that the team that clearly sucks has these veterans, Leonard Fournette from a couple years ago, Derrick Henry this year. And I say the teams that stink just have guys on them that they just want to get rid of, and you got to act before your teammates. Let's move on to another trade. and we'll see if this trade sucks. So here's an interesting one, Theo. This one, again, similar settings, tight end premium, 1.5 or so. This one went down in one of my leagues where Travis Kelce was traded to a contender, a team that basically has it all except for a tight end, and they gave up the 112 in a super flex tight end premium format, and then they had to downgrade the team getting Travis Kelce a full round from 211 to 311. Now let's talk about the ancillary pieces of this trade first. Going from 311 to 211, we know guys that you draft at the end of the second round, Theo. Those guys are long shots to hit, and right now we only see the upside in those guys, right? We're seeing the tree, the Burtons go there, and the Marshawn Lloyd and players we like. But when we're comparing it to 311, the chances of hit go up significantly. So it is a nice little upgrade extra.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting one. I wish we could have seen the way this rookie draft board went. Was this a situation where
I'm looking it up now,
where it was traded OTC? Because if it was traded on the clock, there's a chance that like it was Bo Nix at the 112 and that manager really needed a quarterback. It was a chance that it was a Jonathan Brooks fell to the 112, which happened in some of these leagues. And that would be something where if we're talking about dynasty startup values, even in tight end premium,
it was Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas won at the 112.
But so Brian Thomas, again, I think Brian Thomas has steamed up a little bit in these startups, and there's some positive buzz with him. It's team context, though, Alan. Like, again, taking on Travis Kelce, it makes my window immediately win now.
Let me ask you this.
It's going to influence my decisions.
If you need a tight end, right? Like you've evaluated, your team is ready to go for it right now. Is 112 the right price to pay for Travis Kelce? Too much, too cheap? And I know that he signed the 2-year extension, but we all know he's year to year, right? Like he doesn't have to exercise that option or come back next year. Because there's a lot of teams right now that have a good team, but they have, a tight end that Luke Musgrave, who we like, but you can't really depend on him to be a difference maker. Is this the right price for Travis Kelce? Underpay, overpay? Is this a terrible trade?
I can see it from both sides. If my team is at the 112, I won it last year, and I view myself as a team that can win it again this year. Maybe I have a Christian McCaffrey, maybe I have some of these older players, and I want to push the chips in, and I want to solidify my tight end production. I get it. At the end of the day, I think a year from now, this could really, really burn that Kelce team if that 112 hits. Because again, if Bo Nix hits and he hits better than people, I mean, Brian Thomas, I know, was the answer here. And certainly Brian Thomas, a year from now, I would bet is going ahead of Kelce in startups and in terms of value. So it's really a 1 year.
In this draft, Nix won at the 109, so he was not available.
I wonder if Brooks was available.
No, curious. He went. So this was the guy that was on the clock that traded this 112. So they were looking at the players. It was Thomas, Keon Coleman, Ladd, and Corm Benson, and Penix was there if you wanted him as well.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it from both sides. I think at the end of the day, this is sort of a team context, and this is sort of a team goals. I can completely understand it as a get out of Travis Kelce type deal to accept, though, Alan. Like I give myself two bullets there. Like you bring up the 211. So at the end of the day, it could have been Brian Thomas and Jermaine Burton. It could have been Brian Thomas, and then I could have had an opportunity to kind of pivot to a Ben Sinnott and end up with like a Sinnott and a Brian Thomas for Kelce. I think a year from now, I'm really happy I made that trade. It could be a really painful year. But like you said, I mean, Kelce could retire after this year. We had those fears. You see him all off season long, having a good time, very much in the public eye. So I don't know. I can see this one. I think this one is it's really the kind of the philosophy on how you play Dynasty. It's a shorter term window. But again, unlike the last one, I'm not giving up a surefire, asset. Like the 112, the hit rates go down when you get to that end of the first round. So I like Brian Thomas a lot. He could be DK Metcalf, that level of player, but there's a chance that it doesn't work out for him. I think he'll be pretty good though.
Yeah, when you're talking about player longevity, because you just mentioned that a little bit, right? Especially when we know like Kelce, for example, is really a year-to-year bet. He's not exactly Tony Gonzalez in his last year where we knew it was the end. But how do you account for potential longevity of players in their positions when making these trades, like especially for positions with shorter career spans, like the running backs that you were talking about trading earlier?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. And again, I don't think there's a perfect answer for this one. Again, like I keep using the word team context. It's sort of like the risk you're taking on. Um, it limits a little bit of your flexibility, though, as you know, Alan, when you take on too many old players, because the season goes along. If they're not performing like you paid for, then you're gonna have to take a serious discount. And sometimes guys just box themselves out of trade value. Similar, like last summer trading for an Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler was somebody who still cost you a pretty significant amount in Dynasty, and he lost value so quickly that you were really not able to move him anywhere at the end. I know that the great playoff schedule, and there was sort of like the, hey, Eckler's going to bounce back. So I'm sure there were some leagues where people were paying for Eckler, but the veterans, when they start losing value, it just makes me so limited in what I can do with my roster. That scares me a little bit. So it's sort of like a mitigating risk. I don't want to be too old, and I don't want to push the chips in too early as well, Alan. Like we talk about trade timing a lot, where taking on those older players, sometimes we go into like July, August, and we're like, this roster is it. This is the league champion. I'm gonna crush it this year. And then things start going poorly, and that first round pick that I might have moved, a future first, something like that, Alan, to get this veteran could turn into like the 105 when I thought it was going to be the 112. So I don't know. It's a risky thing. I think that a lot of times the best dynasty managers maintain some balance between this, Alan, where they'll try to like wait, get to close to in the season, then make some strategic moves to try to cover up their weak spots, instead of like pushing it all in way too early when they don't really know which way their team's going to go.
Yeah, I have recently been more of fix it on the fly, buy old players. You can get a lot of value for old players. I remember a couple seasons ago, I had the 101, the Breece Hall year, right? And I went from that to a league champion in this one league by using my first to buy multiple old guys. At the time, I think for my first, I got Mike Evans and Amari Cooper and like another usable running back. I forget. Maybe at the time it was like not Gus Edwards, but it's someone like who you would think about that today, where you're just like, hey, it's RB 27, So two old guys that were going in the first 3 or 4 rounds of a redraft. So I think that there's a couple different ways. I don't mind pushing in, because listen, if you don't, usually a lot of our leagues, Theo, first place gets 70% of the money. Second place more or less doubles their money, and then third place, you're lucky if you get your money back or if there's even a prize. So if I'm swinging and missing, I've made some horrible trades where I've set my franchise back. But when you do connect on them and you do make calculated risks, I think that that is one of the edges, because we always talk about what's the edge in Dynasty now. Everyone's so sharp with the roster construction and how to draft in a startup. I think the edge is using that gap in the redraft market versus Dynasty startup ADP to find real value. And I don't mind using my first. I know like our friend, our colleague, Jordan McNamara always says, use your first rounder to get a top 30 player, which he's right in theory. But I think if you can get multiple players in the top 50 and you can make an immediate run, that's another, I guess, way that it's not popular, but I like to use my first that way in some leagues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love trading away future firsts, and I think
put up the next trade, by the way, while we're talking.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah,
I mean, philosophically, I don't love trading away future firsts. I do it sometimes when it's pushing the chips in, but again, like you said, you have to finish first or second to justify it. Not always, because that player you trade for also can retain value heading in. I just think that having your first round pick in the offseason, it gives you flexibility to add the elite player through the draft. It also gives you flexibility to make these moves to trade up and trade down to try to get the other elite players in the draft. So I don't know. I understand what Jordan's saying there, where maybe dynasty markets sometimes overvalue the first round pick. Acquiring first is something, but end of the day, that's our best opportunity to add elite players, is using our rookie picks. It's just it's just the best way to do it. All
right. So another trade, which I think qualifies as horrible, right? Yeah. Like I wish I could buy Jared Goff like this. For those listening, Jared Goff in a super flex league, start 10, 11, whatever, larger size league with, 12 teams, was traded for a random 25 first and a random 25 second. Let's just call it 107, 106, and 206, 207 right now. This trade went down right after, right around the time Jared Goff got his extension. I don't think there wasn't any negative things going around Jared Goff. I guess this pushed him up a little bit. I don't know. I think Jared Goff is worth more than a 25 first and a 25 second. I would love to buy a top 14 quarterback for this price. Or do you think that he's just not much of a difference maker and this is actually a good trade for the guy who got the 2 picks, Theo?
Again, we don't know where these picks are going to end up, but at the end of the day, I think that the Jared Goff side, Alan, you're not only getting that top 14 quarterback, but you're getting him for multiple seasons now. We've talked about Jared Goff for like 2 years now on Sonic Truth as a guy to go out and get as my favorite target, at the QB2 spot in startups.
Is this the right price? Is this the right price for someone, a first and a second?
I would want a little bit more, certainly at this point after that contract.
Is this the right buying price?
I think that if you can pull this off, I think this is a solid trade. Because again, I think Jared Goff, we talk about the Detroit offense, and that offense has been top 5 in scoring for 2 straight years. Jared Goff also, Alan, doesn't get any credit for the youth around him. Like we talk about, like Jordan Love last year had all these young guys around him, and he deserves all the credit he gets for that. But at the end of the day, when we talk about inexperience around a quarterback who produced in 2023, Jared Goff had a rookie tight end. He had a rookie at running back. He had Jamison Williams on the field a lot, who was essentially a rookie in terms of his, or a second-year player in terms of his actual NFL experience and experience being, around an NFL locker room. So he had a bunch of youth around him, and they had back-to-back seasons with top 5 scoring years. Goff finishes as a QB1 last year and then gets this mega contract. And he also, the only really knock against Goff lately has been longevity, where longevity's out the window. He's locked in there. They're going to box them. They're going to box themselves out of
29 years old.
He could be a quarterback in Detroit till 35 if this thing really, really works out. I mean, don't bet on that. But at the end of the day,
but I think 3 to 5 years you can bet on, right? We normally say play Dynasty in 2 to 3 year windows, Theo. I think when a quarterback like Goff with the pieces around him and they're not going to be in position to strike like you were just alluding to as a top 5 pick, I think you can project 3 to 5 years here. And this is, you said something I want to underline, he was QB7 last year, more fantasy points than Patrick Mahomes, than Tua. He is being valued right now by the market as QB16, lower than Dak and Brock Purdy. And we don't know if Dak, we love Dak Prescott. He was QB2 last year, but I think there's a little bit more uncertainty where Dak Prescott's going to be playing football in 2025. So Jared Goff, if he still if he's gettable for a price like this, you said you don't like to spend your
I make exceptions to the rule, and certainly I think when we look at the 2025 quarterback class, how many of the quarterbacks in that class are we going to like more than Jared Goff a year from now in terms of the dynasty rankings? This is not necessarily a Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels type class. Now, somebody always breaks through. There's a couple of guys that are interesting right now, but at the end of the day, Goff, this could look even better a year from now. If that manager happens to need a quarterback and they're like, I really wish I could have just had Jared Goff back instead of having to dive into this 2025 class of quarterbacks. So I think that's another factor. Not every class is the same when it comes to quarterbacks. We were kind of spoiled by the Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, group in 2022. And then we think that the last 2 years of quarterback classes, we've seen these, all 4 of these guys steamed up, but it's not like that every single year. Some years we're really having to reach and kind of paint a picture for these guys to be, impactful fantasy players out of the quarterback spot. And a lot of these guys don't hit. So I think this is a solid one. I think that if I'm going to trade Jared Goff, I would want to wait till the season starts, Alan, because I think that he's going to be cooking again this year. Like you said, at the end of the day, it's like if he's putting up QB1 numbers again and Detroit's scoring at the rate that we think they're going to score, then I think I'm going to be able to squeeze out a little bit more than just a random first and second.
All right. Well, I think that was the last trade that we were going to do. So I want to spend the next, 15 minutes or so just talking about some dynasty trade theory, some things that, we've seen in our leagues, some mistakes and do's and don'ts and all that kind of stuff, Theo. But, I never take a chance to promote on this podcast, but there's one thing I do want to tell everybody about is, we have our RotoWire YouTube page, and we've been, RotoWire, we do all different sports. So we've had multi-sports on our page. We just spun off the RotoWire fantasy football page. I'm going to ask our producers to put the link in here just so we can get some people. We just started. There's only a couple hundred people that signed up on it. The new RotoWire fantasy football page. If you search RotoWire fantasy football, it'll come up. We started posting a bunch of videos already on there. So if you're listening to this and you want to come check out the new RotoWire fantasy football page, it's 100% football. All right, let's get.
And I'll say this: it's very, very good. And Alan is not going to promote himself as much as he should, but Alan's put a ton of work into it. Highly recommend it. If you are subscribed to Player Profiler's YouTube, go and subscribe to RotoWire's YouTube. You can also watch, as a bonus, Alan and I dropped a podcast on there that was absolute fire. How many copycats have we seen, Alan, to remain unnamed, trying to copy that show title and that show subject we covered? We'll speak for itself. Go check it out for sure.
RotoWire audience loves you, Theo. It was one of our best videos. Fun. So again, there's only, like I said, we've only have like a couple hundred subscribers over there. So be one of the first. But we're putting in some video work over there. All right. I want to talk about terrible dynasty trades process-wise, Theo. Now, you've already outlined what I think is a very interesting one, which is don't buy running backs now, because if they get in, basically anyone that you trade for now, how will you feel if they get injured tomorrow, right? Like, for example, if you trade for Jordan Love and he gets injured, you're going to be bummed, but his value is going to be pretty safe, even if he's out for the year. So that's what you're saying, though, is like if you trade for Derrick Henry and he gets hurt in OTAs or whatever, I mean, he's got no value heading forward. So what are maybe some other mistakes that you see people process-wise make in our dynasty leagues right now, whether it's rookie or, in existing leagues with veterans?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest mistakes you see people make in dynasty is trying to fill out a lineup when we're 3 months away from the season. I think you see people make this mistake in rookie drafts where they'll maybe pass on a player who's a tier above in order to compensate a positional need. And I think a lot of times that really messes people up. We talked about this with the running back trade, where I want to keep my team as talented and as much trade equity as possible until we get to very close to the season. And I don't do that if I'm thinking about, filling out that lineup. What am I going to start week one? Who are my running backs? Who are my tight ends? Who are my quarterbacks? Who are my wide receivers? If I am worried about that, it's going to limit me from having the truly talented players with the most trade equity possible on my roster. So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see people making, especially in rookie drafts, and certainly when it comes to trades, is worrying about that lineup. I can fix that lineup closer to the season. I can fix that lineup in season, but I don't want to trade an elite player for a non-elite player simply because if he balances out my roster position-wise.
Yeah, but here's the you're right. But here's the problem. I'm sitting there managing 40-plus leagues, right? Like, I have good intentions. I'll sit down on the toilet, Theo, and I'll get into a couple of these leagues, right? I got a few minutes to kill, and I'll start saying, okay, here, I'm going to fix there. But then I'll send out a trade. I'll forget that I sent it. By the way, the best thing that Sleeper has, I'm not sure if MFL has it, I'm sure they have, is like an exploding trade. So basically, if you could send a time limit on the trade so it expires, because if something happens and you have like a Mike Evans trade out there, then Mike Evans gets hurt and then someone accepts it. So actually, let's talk about that for a second. Is that in bad taste or is that fair game? If you send out a trade, the player that you're trying to acquire gets hurt, and then when that news breaks, the manager hits accept. Fair game or in poor taste?
I mean, you might be burning your bridges with that manager. But at the end of the day, it's my responsibility that if I don't want that trade in your inbox, I need to remove it. And I need to be responsible for the trade. That's the problem with some of these carpet bombers. We talked about that in the early trade. If I have too many trades out, I could potentially lose track of them. But, I make an offer for something, there's not necessarily a caveat that I get my money back because XYZ. Now is it scummy? If it's a long-term league mate, I maybe don't want to work. I don't want to burn that bridge. But this is we play for keeps in Dynasty, Alan. We're trying to win. And it's like, just because you do something stupid and I benefit from it, is it much different than you sending me an offer where you're undervaluing your asset and I smash accept? Am I supposed to correct you and say, no, actually, this player is not worth a second and a third. This player is actually worth a first and a second. Am I supposed to help you out on that one too? So I don't know. I don't have that much sympathy for some of these guys that are just lose track of what I sent to people in their inbox. It's like, if I leave $500 sitting in the middle of Penn Station in New York City, and I walk back for it, it's going to be gone.
Yeah. I mean, little bit of a different example. I found a wallet full of money one time. I found a wallet full of $700. And I was much younger. I pick it up. I mean, you find a wallet now of $700. You're an adult. You're returning it. I'm returning it. I'm
returning it.
Right. As a kid, when I was like, I was like 17, I was like, I was struggling with it. And there was divine intervention. Like, as I was picking up and I was struggling with it, I heard some guy goes, "Oh, has anyone seen my wallet?" So I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like, that was the sign to do good. I'm glad I did. I hand it to the guy and he gives me a reward. You know what the reward was, Theo?
I hope he gave you one of those hundos.
It was $5.
Cheapskate.
Yep, cheapskate. And it didn't matter. But so what happened? Yeah. So, I was a little, but the great, divine intervention part was before that, I had no money on me. I wanted to buy like a slushie or a hamburger, whatever it was. And the $5 was allowed me to go get it. So whatever.
I guess that's nice, Alan.
Yes.
I have a life. So Matt's not here, so we don't. It's not a mansion life hack, but I have an air tag on my wallet and an air tag on my keychain. It's a life changer. I never look. If I'm missing it, press the little button, look for the sound. It's almost always right near me. But it's that's a life hack. Highly recommend that to our player profiler audience.
There was a couple people that said they couldn't find the RotoWire Fantasy Football only page. Tyler or Jason, they'll throw it in the video description for us. So if you're watching this on the replay, or
Tyler, shout out to Tyler Knable, said that Alan should have thrown hands with this guy.
I mean, it was
17 years old.
So the guy lost his wallet. I returned it. Yeah, that's fine. It's what it was. It was like, you ever play in like a men's league, and good karma. Someone just wrote, you ever play in a men's league and you're collecting money from everyone for the league fee? I think that's what it was. It was like the guy had collected everyone's money, so it wasn't like he had 700 cash on him. He collected, from his baseball or basketball team. But anyway, trust me, I thought about it. I wasn't a good guy. I thought about it. I just happened to do it. And obviously it's so funny. We grow as people, right? Like today, I wouldn't even cross my mind. So I got a credit card returned to me that someone found on the street somewhere where I live in Jacksonville, Florida, Theo. Someone called me and I said, how'd you, or they emailed me. No, you know what it was? They found me on Facebook or Instagram and they said, "Hey, I found your credit card in this street." I was like, "Yep, that's me," So
you're a public figure.
Yeah.
At this point, especially in the Jacksonville area. I mean,
yeah. I'm a lifelong New Yorker.
More well-known. What do you call people from Jacksonville?
A Jacksonian.
Jacksonian.
Yeah. All right, couple more terrible trade do's and don'ts, Theo, that I want to talk about here. Is there the Rashee Rice thing, right? So this comes into run into the burning building, right? Trade for distressed assets. So I think now those who traded for Rashee Rice and gave up a lone second or a second and a third are pretty happy now that we've gotten news that that the charges were, quote, dropped. It sounds like that he paid him off. I'm just speculating, and that he may not even be suspended this year. So we say it every year. Tyreek Hill, there's some bad news about him. He was available for like a 5th round startup pick. Rashee Rice this year. I mean, there's times where it's going to burn you. I've bought into Josh Gordon, into Martavis Bryant,
Justin Blackman.
Justin Blackman. You buy into these guys. But more often than not, is it a terrible trade to go in and buy these distressed assets? Even someone like Rice.
I mean, we've talked about this earlier with Matt. I love buying the distressed assets. I think that a lot of times, anytime you can find fear and panic for a player that we've seen perform at a really high level, especially a player who's not old, I think it's worth it. And Alan, again, when we're talking about the hit rates, like I was able to get Rashee Rice in a single QB league for, I believe it was like the 209 and 2025 third. So the end of the day, like I've already seen Rashee Rice, perform like a low end wide receiver one, whereas the 209, that's something where I'm really hoping that a player can hit like Rashee Rice. So I'm not necessarily giving up something that's going to burn me, and I'm getting an opportunity to buy a guy for sometimes 50 cents on the dollar. Let's say this, Alan, if Rashee Rice, they announce 0 games suspended, and the Chiefs just come out and say, we want Rashee to clean up his behavior off the field, and that's it, then what is he worth in Dynasty?
Yeah. A late first, Brian Thomas,
yeah.
Xavier Worthy. You're making a choice between those players.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I think it's worth it. And I think like if we went back and charted out these buying opportunities with guys, the fear and panic oftentimes is more than what the player actually gets in terms of suspension. Now, we go back to like Ray Rice, certain things like that, you get burned and you're left holding a couple of a dead asset. But I think that even if it's a 60-40 bet, it's the kind of bet you need to make to kind of push your team over the edge. We talk about like being able to acquire difference-making assets in Dynasty.
Is Rice a difference-making asset?
He's a starter. I mean, he's a surefire starter, and I think that he's attached to arguably the best quarterback of all time, which sort of elevates him. So it's a player that we've seen perform at a very high level. There are some parallels with what Rashee Rice did and what Amon-Ra St. Brown did in terms of backloading their scoring, in terms of a guy really performing in the second half of rookie season at that level. I think that he's a difference maker in terms of he's a surefire starter for almost every team in your league if he's healthy on the and on the field. So being able to get him for cheap, even if it means I'm taking on some risk, that's something I'm willing to do.
All right, everybody. You follow Theo as I do at the OG Fantasy. You follow the main account here at Player Profiler. I'm at Alan Seslowsky. And if you can, in the video description below, check out the new RotoWire Fantasy Football Only channel. And Theo, I know you are starting to spearhead as we shift out of Dynasty into Redraft. What is the latest and greatest on this year's Player Profiler's draft kit?
The draft kit is coming along. That should drop at the end of June this year. So right around, let's call it June 30th, July 1st, right in that area, you're going to get a very, very cool product that we put out every year. You not only get the team write-ups, the team breakdowns, signature stats that we think are going to really, really help you identified for every single team. We also have the cameos. So you have people like Alan Seslowsky, people like Matt Harmon, Jim Coventry, Scott Connor, breaking down a player with a write-up and also a video. It's really, really fun. And then plus everybody you consume content of at Player Profiler is doing several players. I mean, I'll probably have 10 in there, Alan, when it's all said and done. But it's a lot of work, but it's something we have a lot of pride in. And Alan, you get $20 off our all-in package using the code Theo right now. So if you want to use the code Theo, you're going to get a little money off. You get your whole season paid for. Not a bad deal.
All right, everybody, we're going to stop there. Let us know in the comments any terrible trades you've seen, you've made. I'm sure we've all made. One of my worst trades, Theo, was I traded 3 first-round picks for David Johnson while he was injured, right? I mean, we've all done those stupid trades. So let us know. That's important. We answer every comment. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time, back next week with another Sonic Truth Dynasty Focus Fantasy Football podcast.
And we also have Jared Smola of Draft Sharks coming on Dynasty Life. Look for that on Friday. But Alan, before we get out of here, I know that we said Matt's not here, so we're actually going to break down what we think about Brian Robinson this year. So why don't you take it away and let us know what you think about him?
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you, allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All-In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.